Fairy tales are both stories of transformation and symbolic poetry. They are gifts from our ancestors, offering symbols and guidance for our human development. In this show, artist, philosopher, and teacher Sean Kramer will lead us into the imaginal realm of fairy tales, where we will find healing images and wise teachings for our own journey through this enchanted world. So welcome to Under Their Spell, meditating on fairy tales.
So welcome everyone. My name is Sean Kramer, and in this series of radio shows we will look at a number of fairy tales, sometimes taking one topic or theme or aspect of fairy tales. Other times, like today, we will walk through the fairy tale step by step and see what insights, what appears to us, what we can get out of it. So in this particular hour, we will, in our imaginations, follow the steps of a young girl on her long, difficult journey towards something she desires and hopes for, a deep union with another person in which she can be seen, known, and loved in her true self. So I'd like us to begin this journey by taking a moment to enter the imaginal realm and open ourselves to the illumination from the angelic messengers. So I ask you to enter your body and your breath. Bring your awareness inward. Close your eyes if that's suitable. And on each out breath, let your body relax. One shaman said that the bridge to the imaginal realm is deep relaxation. So with each breath, feel your body relaxing, maybe sinking, falling into a deeper world. And imagine yourself walking on a path, the path of your life. And as you're walking on this path, you come to a wall. And in the wall is an opening, an archway. As you walk up to the archway, you look over it, and over it there's a horse's head. And the horse's head speaks to you. It tells you something that will help you at this time of your journey. Just listen, imagine what it says to you. And now walk through that gateway. What do you see? Let your imagination work on its own. Now return to your breath and let us open our spirits to the holy angels. May they enlighten us, put order into our imaginations. Inspire us to feed our imaginations with healthy and transforming images. May they strengthen the lights of our minds, that we may see the wisdom contained in the images of the fairy tale we're going to look at today. And now, staying in our imaginal world, in our imagination, I would like to give you a picture of the whole landscape of this story, which is sometimes called the Goose Girl. Another title is the Speaking Horsehead. So before we go through the parts of it, let us get a vision of the whole. So imagine yourself up in a hot air balloon, up high, and you look down and you see the whole landscape. Over to your left, off in a distance, there's a castle. This is the castle of the princess, who this story will follow, her home with her mother. And far off on your right, the other side of your view of the landscape, is another castle in a city surrounded by a wall. That is the home of the prince, where the princess is going. And in between is a road that follows a river. And outside the castle and city of the prince are fields, whereas we will see the princess is going to have to spend some time tending geese before she enters the castle with the prince. So you see the whole picture, the landscape of this story. And we see right away that it is a story about two people who start off at a distance. The princess and prince are, as the fairy tale says, a long way apart from each other. So this story is about the distance between two people and the process of overcoming that distance. In fairy tales, the external landscape symbolizes an inner landscape. So the external distance is a symbol of the inner distance between two people. And overcoming that distance is symbolized by marriage. So this fairy tale is not just about the external marriage or rite, but it symbolizes the inner marriage of two people. So we see the whole story. Let us now walk through the story part by part. And we're going to take this story in 4 parts, or we could think of it as 4 acts of a play. In the first part, the princess is at home with her mother in the castle and is in the process of being sent away or separated from her mother. The second act of the story will be the journey along the road that follows the river. The third act will be the period in which the princess is set to work outside the city. And the final act will be the union with the prince, the marriage, and the castle. So let's begin the journey and follow with the princess. So the story begins by telling us that the princess has been betrothed to a prince who is living in a faraway castle. And she is being sent off by her mother, and her mother gives her some gifts for the journey. So the princess has an inheritance from the mother that she will take into her relationship with the prince, or into the process. And we'll see it's a mixed inheritance. Things that she gets from her mother, some help and some hinder her in moving into this new relationship. And the mother gives her daughter a golden cup, a maid to go with her on the journey, a horse to ride, and this horse has the ability to speak. It has a voice. And in the fairy tale, it is called Falada. There's some question about this name. I myself lived in Portugal for a while, and I know in Portugal, Falada has to do with the word to speak, to falar, to speak, something spoken. And the last thing that the mother gives her daughter is something very interesting. The mother goes by herself into her bedroom, takes out a knife, and cuts her finger. And she lets 3 drops of blood fall onto a white cloth, which then she gives to her daughter, telling her to keep this on her way, that it will help her, and not to lose it. So we'll come back to the golden cup, the maid, and the talking horse, but let's think a little bit about this very vivid, powerful image of a mother who is in the process of separating from her daughter, sending her daughter off to form a new life, to leave her mother and eventually become a mother herself. And this powerful image that expresses, as fairy tales do in very vivid, visual, external ways, something very deep and interior, the relationship between a mother and daughter, as a gift of a cloth with drops of blood taken from the mother's own body. So what might this mean? Well, there's a number of meanings, certainly, which I can't exhaust. But think about, where does she draw the blood? The mother goes into her bedroom. So this alludes certainly to sexuality, to birth, to a girl's beginning, her menstruation, the mother passing on to her daughter what it means to be a woman in its many aspects. And this is common in fairy tales, especially about young girls, that there's an important moment and there's a symbol of drops of blood. And this connects with initiation rituals, which for girls commonly began when they had their first period. And this was the time when they were initiated in the transition from being children to women. It also is an image of woundedness, of vulnerability. The awakening of the girl's awareness of her own physicality, sexuality, and vulnerability of being a human, and for her especially of being a woman. So with these gifts, golden cup, maid, talking horse, and the cloth of blood, the girl sets out on her journey. So here we begin the second act of our story. Their journey along the road and beside the river. So as they're traveling, and the princess riding on her talking horse Falada, the maid on her own horse, the princess becomes extremely thirsty. She feels a kind of uncontrollable thirst. And she asks the maid to give her a drink from the golden cup that her mother has given her. The maid refuses and tells the princess to get off the horse and bend down and just drink from the stream herself. Lap up the water of the river, really like an animal. And the princess is reluctant, but she does it. And this happens 2 times. on the road. And the second time, while she's bent down, lapping up the water from the stream, the cloth with the drops of blood falls out and flows away on the stream. And the princess does not even notice it. She's unaware that she has lost the cloth and all it signifies. Because of this, she becomes powerless, and it says the maid now has the power. And the maid commands the princess to switch the clothes. She takes the clothes of the princess and to switch the horses and to take an oath under pain of death that she will never tell what happened and who she really is. So let's pause here and think about this. Very powerful imagery. First, the thirst and her choice of drinking from the river, either from the golden cup or just down on her hands and knees, lapping it up. So there we have two kind of ways of satisfying thirst. You might say thirst for all our deep instinctual desires that we inherit from our animal, mammalian, deep evolutionary biological nature. So to drink from the golden cup is a symbol of culture. In other words, we have to drink from the cup is an object of human making. So it's a symbol of the positive aspect of human culture and what it can do for us, and how it can transform and elevate our deepest desires, our instincts, our impulses. We can think maybe an example would be the Japanese tea ceremony. It's a whole ritual around simply drinking some tea. But in the tea ceremony, the person comes in and they're invited to slow down, become aware, appreciate the surroundings, the art, the flowers, the cup. So the experience of just drinking, of just satisfying thirst, has been transformed, elevated, humanized, spiritualized through human culture. And this is an image then in the story, imagined through the golden cup. What human culture can do for us. It can transform even our instincts into something of a higher consciousness. Then drinking just right from the water is a more spontaneous, thoughtless, maybe unconscious use of parts of ourselves and our desires. The gold is a very strong image in fairy tales. Sometimes students say right away, well, it's a symbol of wealth, and that kind of shows our commercial mentality of our culture. But gold is actually matter plus light. Gold is something material but luminous. So it symbolizes matter plus light or consciousness, awareness, spirituality. So gold is a symbol of the transformed, fully realized humanity, what we're meant to be. Material, physical beings, and spiritual conscious beings shining through. And that's something that we need culture to help us to realize. And that profound human culture is about this. The kind of fallen, decadent human culture is about just plunging us into the river and maybe drowning us in the river. I'm reminded of a recent film called The Knight of Cups, named after the tarot card, the Knight of Cups. And in the film, the main character as a young boy, is told a story by his father. And the father tells the boy about a king who sends his son off on a journey to find a pearl. And on the journey, stops and drinks, I think in the story, from a well. And when he drinks, it makes him forget the pearl and what he's doing. He's lost the idea of the goal, the higher end of the journey. And like in our fairy tale, the immersion in life, in our instincts, desires, impulses, the current of life and culture, it can be a cause of forgetting, of loss of connection, like the girl losing the cloth and the blood, loss of connection with the deeper things of the past, of our own story, and of our goal, of our journey. So this happens to the girl. So she's been replaced by the maid, and they continue on their journey to the castle. And when they arrive at the castle, the prince comes out and right away takes the maid, the false princess, in as his bride. And the true princess is given work as a goose girl tending geese outside the city in the fields. Hence the title of our fairy tale. The false bride, the maid, then requests the prince to cut off the head of the talking horse because she's afraid that it will tell the story of what has happened. So this is the end of the second act of our play, you might say our journey. And let's pause a little bit here and think about some of the meaning of this. And it's helpful in fairy tales to imagine them as if they were dreams. They are very close to dreams. They're very dreamlike, and we can enter deeper in their meanings if we look at them as if they were a person's dream and what it would have meant. So just taking the story so far, which is actually the kind of descent of the princess, the Goose Girl. The next part will be her ascent, the healing of the split, of the separation from the prince and being taken over by the maid. But if we just look at this first part, which is the kind of dark half of our story, and imagine it was someone's dream. So if it was a dream, it would be really kind of a nightmare. And imagine it was, say, the dream of a young woman who just became married or was just about to get married. And she had this as a dream, that she dreamt that her groom, her bridegroom, her beloved, takes someone else off on the honeymoon or into the honeymoon suite and leaves her outside. So if this was someone's dream, what would you imagine would be the fears and desires of this person about their marriage or just a relationship? Someone might be dreaming this about the relationship, that the person they're in relationship with is actually mistakes someone else for them and leaves them aside. Well, the dream, I imagine, would be expressing the fear that the husband or groom doesn't really know you, if this was your dream, is you would be afraid that the person is not marrying you for who you are, but in love with and marrying some false image or idea of you. So it would be a very good dream for someone who had that concern and fear. One woman once told me that she spent 2 years with a man in a relationship until suddenly it dawned on her that she didn't love him, but she loved an idea she had of him. And that ended the relationship. The psychoanalyst Marion Woodman told a kind of heart-wrenching story of a woman that she knew who had been married for 25 years. And after 25 years of marriage, her husband left her. And she said the exact moment that he was walking out the door, she had this sudden insight and realization that her husband never knew her. Through the whole marriage, 25 years, he never knew her. But it only struck her, she only saw that the moment he was walking out the door. This is something very powerful. It makes my heart drop to think about that. But it's something that happens to people, and this fairy tale is telling us that this is something that happens in relationships. So for 25 years, she was the Goose Girl, cast outside, and someone else, an image or a false self, was involved in the marriage or relationship. So this is the fear expressed by this fairy tale and the desire of the dream as we imagine it. What is the desire, the deep desire being expressed here by this story and the image? Well, the desire is a person's desire to not just be loved or be in a relationship or be married, but the desire to be known and loved for who you really are, for your true self. And also for this to be mutual, to be in a relationship where you are known and seen for your true self and you see the other and you love one another. So this is the deep desire that is behind this fairy tale. It's saying that this is a very good and desirable thing, and recognizing that, but also that it's not easy, it's very difficult to achieve this. Sometimes people use the term fairy tale or fairy tale life or fairy tale ending or fairy tale marriage to mean something easy, as if people say, oh, life isn't a fairy tale, meaning it's just not easy, you just don't get a happy marriage. But the fairy tales aren't teaching that at all, as we see here. The fairy tale is telling us that this marriage, this inner marriage between two people, where you're known and loved for your true selves, is something very difficult. It takes a long journey, and there's a lot of difficult experiences to go through. That it's not merely enough to follow our impulses, our thirsts, our desires for this, but we have to pass through these trials and transformations. The writer, William James, he said when two people are together in a relationship, there's usually 6 people there. What did he mean by that? Well, he said there's the two, each person really is, their real selves. Then there's who each person thinks the other is. And then there's who each person thinks they themselves are. And he said, generally, these are all different people, 6 different people. So it shows the difficulty, right, of having a relationship where you really know and love each other in your true self and not in your either false or imagined selves. So that's the goal of this journey of the girl, to bring all those different selves together in a union of love. So then, with this view, who's the maid? What does the maid symbolize? So the maid is the false self, the false persona, or the person who becomes identified with a false self and lives out of that. So the maid and the princess, the Goose Girl, are really the same person, or aspects of the same person, or two selves that we can have. The deeper self and the false self, or the false persona. And to the extent that someone enters into and lives out of a false, in a sense, a deceitful self, like the maid, then the true self becomes silent, right? Voiceless and exiled, like the princess does. So they live their life and their relationships where the true self doesn't have a voice, can't speak, is afraid to speak. So the maid in this story, she's wearing the clothes of another person, she's riding the horse of another person, taking someone else's journey, pretending to be someone else. But what is she doing that for? Well, she's doing it for love. So the maid is the person or the direction of life that we could take, in which we seek love by adopting a false identity, a false image. And she also cuts off the horse's head because she's afraid that if her true self is revealed, that she will lose love. So that's the fear and conflict of this story, that we desire love and we desire to be loved in our true self, but we also are afraid that if our true self or parts of it are revealed, we will lose the love. And there are many reasons why we might feel that. And one is our own experience. We've probably experienced loving someone and realizing that we had a false image of someone that we were loving, and when we came to discover more about them, the love lessened. So being on that side of it, we are afraid that the same thing might happen to us. And it's very interesting in the fairy tale that they say that the maid was given by the mother. So we can wonder, where does this attitude come from where we think to get love we have to hide our true self? And the fairy tale suggests that it often comes from the family, our parents. It's part of the inheritance we bring into relationships, part of the conflicted aspect of our relationship, at least for many of us. Often it is in the family or as children that we learn that to get love, we must hide our real feelings and thoughts and accommodate or develop a false self. And more generally, the fairy tale tells us that it's often just part of the process of growing up and meeting the difficulties of life, that we face the danger of adapting, of getting ahead in life or obtaining love in life by developing a false identity and cutting ourselves off from the true self, beheading that powerful part in ourself, the horse that has a voice. We cut off its head and dissociate from that true self and its voice. So let's move on to the last two parts of the story, where the fairy tale gives us some images for the, might say, healing or the transformation or way out of this inner conflict that is very human and that perhaps all of us meet with as we go through life. So the Goose Girl, now, the princess, is sent out of the city to tend geese. And as she leaves the city, she walks through a gateway, and she herself has paid the executioner of the horse, the man who cut off the horse's head, to take the horse's head and nail it over the gateway so that she can see it and be reminded of it. And as she walks under the gateway out to tend the geese, the horse's head speaks to her. It reminds her of her mother, says, if your mother could see this, her heart would be broken. So the horse still has a voice and is reminding her. So I thought of another parallel with the movie The Knight of Cups, where the character goes off to Hollywood and he's lost in the life of Hollywood and all it offers. And every once in a while his father's voice comes into his head saying, remember the pearl. That's like this, the horse's head. Remember something that you've forgotten. Remember your deeper self. Remember the goal of realizing your true self. So she goes out into the field with a boy who is tending the geese named Conrad. And while they're out in the field, she undoes her hair, and she and the boy both see that her hair is gold. She has hair of gold. There she's starting to remember the pearl, starting to discover that who she is and the mystery of her nature and her destiny. And the little boy, Conrad, is just fascinated. For him, it's a plaything, and he wants to grab and touch her hair. And so the Goose Girl, she says a poem, a song, and asks the wind to blow, and it blows the boy's hat off, and he runs after it. And then she puts her hair back up, and he comes back, and he's angry at her, and he won't talk to her while they're out there. And this happens every time they go out to tend the geese. And the little boy, Conrad, becomes so upset and frustrated, he goes to the king and says he doesn't want to work with this girl anymore because she talks to a horse's head that's nailed over the gate, and she calls on the wind and it blows his hat away. And the king, the father of the prince, the old king, is interested. He has already noticed her, he's been watching her, and he wants to discover more about her. Different than the prince. The prince is still in his false relationship, but the king is someone who's aware and looking for other people's true self. So the king follows them out, and he sees the Goose Girl speaking to the horse, and then how she makes the boy's hat flow away. So he asks her who she is, what's her story. And she says that she can't tell. If she tells her story, she's afraid she will die. And again, this reemphasizes the idea that we mentioned, that it can be a very deep thing that someone learned back further than they can remember into their childhood, that if they reveal certain truths about themselves, that they might die, that their survival seems to depend upon this development of the false self and the hiding of the true self. So the king does something quite interesting, and here's a key to the imagery, to what this fairy tale suggests as part of a solution for all of us of this problem. He tells her, well, if you can't tell me, crawl into this oven here and tell your story to the oven. Which she does. She crawls in, tells her story to the oven, and he listens in the pipe of the oven and hears her story. And she crawls out, and he realizes who she is, and he tells the prince, and they realize that there's been a false bride, and the true bride is the princess, the Goose Girl. So what is that image? Why does she crawl into an oven? Well, one aspect is it's clearly a womb image. It's an image of rebirth for her. But it's also for her reconnecting with what she lost in the cloth. The connection with her mother, or you could say the great mother, the mother goddess, nature, her feminine nature, right? The power she has that she shares in of giving life, of the process of creation. And the king, he's one who provides that safe space for her to tell her story. And when she tells her story, she is reborn, she's healed. I remember one therapist I had, and that's how he would begin. He said, tell me your story. I consider it a sacred task to listen to people's stories. And that's something we can do and should do, to create this safe space for others to tell our story and to experience that healing. So the very last act, we'll finish with the last image, is of this fairy tale. They make a feast and sit the true princess on one side of the prince and the false maid on the other side. And the maid doesn't recognize the true princess. And they ask the maid what she would do, what should be the punishment or consequence if such and such happened, and they describe exactly what happened, that someone stole someone's identity and tried to take love and relationship through deception and this false process of lying and deception that she did. And the maid herself comes up with a solution. She says that person should be put in a barrel with nails hammered and pointing inward, stripped naked, stuck in that barrel, and dragged around by horses until she dies. And the hearers and the king say, well, you've made your own judgment yourself. And they carry it out. The maid is rolled around in the barrel of nails until she dies, and the princess is married to the prince. So let me finish, and we can discuss more if people want, or people could call in. Let me finish with that and allow people, if anyone would like to call in now with a question or comment or to discuss this fairy tale. The phone number is 240-979-4111. So again, the phone number is 240-979-4111. Or you can email any comments or questions to projectbringmetolife@gmail.com. So if anyone wants to join in, please call and with your comments or questions. And I will make some comments or reflections maybe on that last image of the maid being stuck in the barrel of nails, which is certainly a very harsh, violent image. And maybe affects some of us as too harsh or a harsh punishment. But we really all have deep down in us a desire for justice, real justice, not false justice. G.K. Chesterton said that children love justice and adults love mercy. Because as we become adults, we experience more and more the things we do wrong, and we want to mitigate that sense of justice that we have really as children. And the fairy tale is addressing that child's desire for justice. And of course, the fairy tale tells that the story is, the consequence is made by the maid herself. So another way of reading that is that it's not so much a punishment, but an image of the actual consequences of inner deception and self-deception. That it's the psychological state of that. Let's see, so we have a question. What was that question? And if Salamon would like to come on, there was a question that I think was emailed that I missed it. So
Can you hear me?
Oh yes, I can hear you now. Hello, Salamon.
Hello. Were you not able to see the question?
It just flashed really quick, so I didn't get to read it.
Okay. The first one said, why do you think the authors chose a magical horse to aid the princess? By Mackenzie.
Okay, yes. I think my thoughts on the horse are that, well, for one, the magic of the horse is that it can speak. Right? So it has a voice. And that's a theme of the story, that she becomes unable to tell who she is in her story. And so the horse, the speaking horse, I think is an image of that part of herself, that voice that's speaking, that she's cut off when she pursues love by a false identity. And why particularly a horse? Well, a horse is something powerful that brings us on our journey, and the image is not just the horse, but the woman on a horse, which can be an image for the whole person. And the horse is very physical. So sometimes a person, a woman or a man on a horse, symbolizes different parts of our being, and the horse is the more physical part. And so when the horse's head is cut off, I think it symbolizes that when the process of living through a false self and becoming cut off from our true self involves very much being cut off from our body and our physicality. So the going into the oven is also an image of the horse's head being returned to its body. So the story just leaves the horse because it's a symbol, and because the healing is going into the oven, which is reconnecting with her body. So I think the fairy tale is telling that when we lose the state of being dissociated from our true self, our voice, involves very much being disconnected from our body and its physicality. And so that's why I think it has to do with this image of the horse. The horse is the power and feeling in life that we can get back by returning to our body. So that was there another question?
Yeah, we have a few more. The next one is from Cindy. How did Annie find the confidence to be the person she was supposed to be?
Say that again? How did
Annie says ANI.
So I guess she's referring to the girl. I'm not. That might be. I know there's other versions, and there's this story of that. Is that maybe what she means by the name?
I think so.
Okay. How did she get the confidence to be her true self?
Mm-hmm.
And so the symbols in the story have like this step-by-step process that she's going through. And so there were many images of it. And one turning point is when she's out in the field with Conrad and she takes down her hair and finds it's gold. And it seems an awakening, that some sense of her true self. And then what she does there is, I think, interesting to contrast with when she gives up the golden cup and submits to the maid. There's a change there in the first part on the journey, when she drinks from the water and gives up the golden cup and loses her identity. She gives in to the maid there. But then when she's with Conrad and he wants to play with her hair, which is another kind of desire image like the thirst, she takes control of that herself. She begins to see that there's some part of herself that she needs to take care of and responsibility for. And it's not enough to just follow the desires and impulses, but there's something higher about herself, something mystical and golden that she needs to keep connection with, and that will guide how she relates to her own desires and other people's desires of what they want from her and how they see her. So that's, I think, a crucial step in the story, maybe, and symbolized about her kind of transition and her awakening of starting to take steps and choices about herself to really speak and realize her true self. Another question?
Yeah, this one is from Mackenzie again. Why do you think there's a strong connection to geese in the story?
Okay, yes, right. We didn't talk about that because it's... So I have a few ideas about that. I say, well, I can think of three possible reasons why the imagery of geese and her time out with the geese, maybe some more. But geese are, of course, journeying creatures, migrating birds. And this story is very much about her taking a journey and leaving her mother and going out on this journey of life. And she began to... One way you can look at her submission to the maid is that as she went out on life away from her mother, that her insecurities and fears led her to try to stay as a child and find a mother replacement. And so the geese are images of continuing on that journey, not being stuck. Another aspect of geese is that they are strong pair bonding animals. So it's an image of the what she's going for, to find this really deeper, more stable, lasting, loving union with another person. And last thing, maybe I think I'll mention with the geese. Geese are also often symbols of communication, of expression, and because they clearly have this loud sound and they fly and they make the geese sound. So their image is of a voice of communication, which she has lost at that period. And so by her time with the geese, she's getting back in touch with these things in her voice, her desire for some deeper relationship with another person, and her need and call to continue on her journey of life and growth. And so she does it in that beautiful way of connecting with those things in the deep world of nature. And any other questions? Do we have time for more? Or?
We got about 2 minutes left. There was another question, and it was asking about why didn't she just go and demand her rightful throne? Does it show more courage to do less obvious choices?
And I look at it, I would approach that question by seeing the story in its symbolic way, that the maid is part of herself, and it for her, and probably for all of us, there's a process to go through to express deeper parts of ourself. And so the story is symbolizing that it's not always so easy to say, just be yourself or be true to yourself, that there has to be inner processes to go through to realize that.
Very cool. That is all the questions that we have.
Okay. So maybe we could end with a little meditation.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all the questions and for being with me on this imaginary journey. So to finish, return to your breath and your body, and just notice your body. How is it feeling? As the fairy tale symbolizes for us, that our growth, our healing, our entering and staying with our true self is very connected with our inhabiting our body, listening to our body. What is our body really feeling? So maybe think of one word or one name for what you're feeling in your body right now. Whatever it is, let it be, it's okay. Peace, joy, fear, anger, sadness. Listen to the feeling and notice it, name it, and welcome it. That is always a beautiful step to listening to the voice, the deep inner voice of who we are, what we really think and feel. And thank you very much for being with me, and I look forward to next time when we will journey with Hansel and Gretel through the dark forest.